Hey everyone, Ashley Vargas here. In this video, we are going to talk about how to create your powerlifting meet attempts. That way you are set up for success to hit your goals for your next powerlifting meet. As we dive into how to set your meet attempts and calculate what those should be, there's a couple things that you need to keep in mind. Just because you set your meet attempts in advance, which I highly recommend that you do, does not mean that throughout the course of the meet, they're not going to change depending on what your goal for that meet is. So you definitely need to make sure that you have all of those attempts created in advance. Know what your game plan is going to be, but also understand that depending on your own performance at the meet and then the performance of your competitors is really going to dictate how your second and your third attempts are going to go. In every powerlifting meet, regardless of the federation, each lifter gets 3 attempts for each one of their lifts. So you have 3 attempts for your squat, 3 attempts for your bench, and 3 attempts for your deadlift. Now, you want to be very aware and very cautious of what you are choosing for your attempts, especially your openers. Because once you attempt a weight on the platform, if you fail it for whatever reason, but if you fail that lift, you cannot attempt anything lower in weight. So you have to do that at either that exact same weight or you have to increase your weight. You can never go lower. So you can see how this can put you in a very bad spot if you, we'll say squats, for example, the first lift that you're going to do. If you pick a squat attempt for your opener that is way too heavy and you can't complete it on the platform, you have to either attempt that same weight 2 more times or you have to continue to increase it. Now, if you fail that lift for all 3 attempts and you don't get a total for your squat, you do not get a total for the meet. And so you want to make sure that you are picking those wisely. That way you can make sure to, 1, set yourself up for success, 2, make sure that you're going to hit those goals, and 3, just make sure that you get a total for your meet. So how do we actually calculate these attempts? This process is going to start during the prep process. So typically about 30 to 40 days out from your powerlifting meet, you're going to want to test your 1 rep max. Now there's a couple different ways that you can do this, but for most lifters, I would recommend actually working up to your true 1 rep and attempting that. Depending on how advanced you are or how deep into your powerlifting career you are, doing a 3 rep max and then calculating your 1 rep is sometimes okay. But for purposes of this conversation, we're just going to use like working up to your true 1 rep max. So once you figure out what those numbers are, your 1 rep for your squat, your bench, and your deadlift, you are then going to use that as a baseline to calculate your attempts for your powerlifting meet. Now that we figured out what our 1 rep max is, now we can start to calculate our first, second, and third attempts for our powerlifting meet. I had mentioned before that your first attempt, you want to make sure that it is a number that you are guaranteed to hit regardless of whether or not you're having a good or a bad lifting day. So the very first attempt is going to set the tone for the entire meet. If you fail your first squat, which is the very first lift you're going to do, if you fail that opening squat, that's very difficult to come back from, not just physically, but also mentally. So you want to make sure that you're setting the tone in a positive way for the entire meet. So typically I recommend 92% for your opener. This is something that most lifters can hit even if it's a bad day. And if the rest of the meet goes as planned, that first attempt really isn't going to matter anyways. So 92% is what you want to shoot for your very first attempt. So you're going to take that 1 rep max and whatever that number is, and you're going to multiply it by 0.92 in order to get that first attempt number. To calculate the second attempt, we want to calculate 97% of our 1 rep max that we tested during that prep process. Now, depending on what your goal is for the meet, this is the point in the meet where we may stick with that number, or depending on how first attempts went, or depending on what your goal is for that meet, we may shift those numbers around a little bit. But again, you want to make sure that you have that number calculated and ready to go just in case. So if your goal is to win your weight class, we'll say, you winning your weight class is going to be very dependent on what other lifters in your weight class are actually lifting. So we can have that, whatever that 97% is, teed up and ready to go for our second attempt. However, if that is not going to put you in a good spot going into your third attempt based on what your competitors are lifting, then we're probably going to have to calculate that and readjust. So you want to make sure that you are paying attention to the scoreboard and paying attention to where the projected total is for the fellow lifters in your weight class. That way you can make sure that you stay 1 step ahead. That way you set yourself up for success to hit your goal to win your weight class for that particular meet. Going into the third attempt is really where you want to push yourself as a lifter. Most lifters, regardless of the goals for the meet, they want to PR their third attempt. It's just very exciting. It's very rewarding. So I highly encourage you to do it. Now you want to make sure that the weight that you're putting, requesting on the bar is going to be something that's realistic for you, but still going to push you. So I recommend going 105% of whatever your tested 1 rep max was during prep. So 105%, that is a number that's realistic for most lifters. It is not too big of a jump for that 97% to where it's really going to shock you to have that weight on your back. But it's also going to be something that you should be very proud of once you actually attempt it. So 105% is what I would recommend. However, the only time that I don't recommend that is with bench. Bench is a very tricky lift to add weight on or add weight onto. So I would suggest going 102, maybe 103% if you're feeling really confident on that bench. Anytime I have pushed a competitor to 105 or even pushed myself to 105, it 9 times out of 10, they failed it or I failed it. So 102, 103 is typically the sweet spot for bench.